This is America, and that is the US Treasury. Here, the national debt has exceeded GDP for the first time since World War II.
The United States is the most indebted country in the world.
We have found, over the last 7 years, we have found tremendous wealth right under our feet.
What if America's debt problem isn't a failure of the system, but one of its most profitable features? This is Fiscal Forge. America has one of the most advanced economies in human history. The world's largest financial markets, some of the most powerful banks on the planet, and one of the highest levels of consumer debt ever recorded. At first glance, those facts may seem unrelated, but what if they're deeply connected? Today, Americans owe trillions of dollars across mortgages, credit cards, auto loans, student loans, and personal debt. Every year, that number grows larger. And despite countless articles warning about debt, despite financial education campaigns, despite economic crises, the borrowing never seems to stop. Why? Is America simply bad with money? Or is something bigger happening beneath the surface? Because when we follow the money, a fascinating picture begins to emerge. A picture where debt isn't merely a consumer problem, it's a product, a business, and possibly one of the most important engines powering the modern economy.
This is America, and that is the US Treasury. Here, the national debt has exceeded GDP for the first time since World War II. That costs the government $1 trillion a year in interest alone. Is the government gambling with the world's largest economy, and can it bring that ever-increasing number under control? I'll be back with more on that later, but first, here's Cyril Vanier in our Washington studio.
Alex Baird, thank you very much. The United States is the most indebted country in the world. Almost every year in my lifetime and yours, the U.S. government has chosen to spend more money than it collects, sometimes a lot more. Over decades, that builds up, and the national debt now stands at $39 trillion, exceeding the entire U.S. economy. Now that is something we have not seen since World War II. Is it sustainable? U.S. President Donald Trump, who has added to the debt himself, has flagged it as a vulnerability for years.
We have found, over the last 7 years, we have found tremendous wealth right under our feet. So good, especially when you have $20 trillion in debt.
The Obamacare repeal and replace plan would significantly reduce the federal deficit. When I heard we were going to Iraq, somebody said, oh, we're going for the oil. $15 trillion. That does a lot to solve our deficit problem, doesn't it?
Growth is the way. If we grow like this, we go from having at $37 trillion, we go from having high debt to low debt.
I will bring our energy companies back. They'll be able to compete. They'll make money. They'll pay off our national debt.
Debt wasn't always woven into everyday life. For much of history, borrowing carried social stigma. People borrowed for emergencies. Businesses borrowed to expand. Governments borrowed during crises. But consumer borrowing was relatively limited. That changed dramatically after World War II. Banks discovered something powerful. Debt could be packaged, scaled, marketed, and sold. Credit cards emerged. Auto financing expanded. Mortgages became increasingly accessible. The result was a transformation of consumer behavior. Instead of saving first and buying later, people could buy first and pay later. The change seemed beneficial. Economic growth accelerated. Homeownership increased. Consumption expanded. But hidden beneath that growth was a fundamental shift. Future income became a product. And once future income could be monetized, an entirely new business model was born.
Now, the national debt's practical impact on Americans, that's hotly debated by economists. Its most visible consequences are higher borrowing rates and the concern that future generations will end up paying the price. Heidi Jo Castro reports.
If you ask the average American about their country's national debt, few would tell you that it is a primary concern. But as ask anyone trying to buy a car or a house or anything that requires a loan, well, the interest rate that they pay is linked to the interest rate the government pays for its own growing debt.
I'm going to show you this one house that sold in my neighborhood.
Ayanna Brickhouse is a real estate agent in Springfield, Virginia. She's seen less buying and selling of homes as mortgage rates have risen in recent years. That's because mortgage interest rates are pushed up by Treasury yields, which are pushed up by the national debt.
Most people believe banks make money by storing deposits. That's true, but it's only part of the story. Modern banking thrives on lending. Loans generate interest. Interest generates revenue. Revenue generates profits. The model sounds simple, but the scale is extraordinary. Every mortgage, every auto loan, every student loan, every revolving credit card balance represents future cash flow. The longer debt survives, the more valuable that cash flow becomes. This creates an interesting incentive. Banks don't necessarily want consumers to fail. Defaults are expensive. What they want is something else. Consumers who keep paying month after month, year after year. A borrower who consistently services debt can become significantly more profitable than someone who pays everything off quickly. And once millions of consumers participate simultaneously, debt evolves from a financial tool into an economic engine. If debt is so expensive, why do people keep using it? The answer lies in psychology. Humans naturally prioritize the present. A purchase today feels real. Future payments feel distant. Behavioral economists call this present bias. We value immediate rewards more than future consequences. Modern finance takes advantage of this tendency. Monthly payments make large purchases feel smaller. Credit cards remove spending friction. Buy now, pay later services divide costs into manageable pieces. Everything appears affordable. And because the financial pain is delayed, borrowing becomes normalized. Most consumers don't wake up intending to accumulate debt. They simply make a series of reasonable decisions. One purchase, one financing offer, one monthly payment, repeated over time. And eventually, borrowing becomes part of everyday life. Debt doesn't just benefit banks. Entire industries evolved around financing. Housing, education, automobiles, retail, consumer electronics, even healthcare. Many sectors depend heavily on consumers having access to borrowed money. Without financing, demand would likely fall dramatically. Home prices might adjust. Vehicle sales could slow. Consumer spending could weaken. That's why debt is deeply embedded throughout the economy. It's not merely supporting purchases, it's supporting industries. And when industries become dependent on borrowing, the incentive to encourage borrowing becomes stronger. Not necessarily through conspiracy, but through economics. The system naturally rewards continued consumption. And debt often makes that consumption possible.
The dollar remains the global reserve currency. There are plenty of investors wanting to buy it through US-issued bonds. But if the world fell out of love with America and its greenbacks, well, then the government would be forced to pay much higher interest rates on its debt. That could certainly put a squeeze on spending for things like education, defense and health. In fact, the US government already spends more servicing its debt than it does individually for defense and Medicaid. The non-partisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget is worried. It forecasts that within 5 years, the average amount of interest paid to service the national debt could exceed the amount of economic growth in the United States, and that would lead to a debt spiral. Well, there's widespread agreement that that level of US national debt is unsustainable, but with it forecast to grow to 175% of the country's economic output within 30 years, it seems there's still no consensus on how to deal with it. They'll keep on kicking that can down the street.
The danger isn't debt itself. Debt can be useful. Businesses use debt. Homeowners use debt. Investors use debt. The danger emerges when debt becomes normal for survival. When groceries require credit cards, when emergencies require loans, when basic living expenses exceed available income, that's when financial resilience begins to disappear. households become more vulnerable, savings shrink, unexpected expenses become crises, and financial stress becomes permanent. For millions of consumers, this isn't a future scenario. It's already reality. This raises a difficult question. Could the modern economy function without widespread borrowing? Probably not in its current form. Consumer spending drives a significant portion of economic activity, and debt often amplifies spending. Remove borrowing entirely, and economic growth would likely slow. But that doesn't mean unlimited debt is sustainable. History repeatedly shows what happens when borrowing expands too aggressively. Asset bubbles form. Financial crises emerge. Corrections become unavoidable. The challenge isn't eliminating debt, it's maintaining balance. Too little borrowing slows growth. Too much borrowing creates instability. And finding that balance remains one of the greatest challenges facing modern economies. Fortunately, understanding the system changes everything. Because once you understand how debt generates profit, you begin viewing borrowing differently. Not as free money, not as income, but as a financial tool. The goal isn't avoiding debt entirely, it's avoiding unnecessary debt, building emergency savings, understanding interest, investing consistently, and recognizing the difference between productive debt and consumer debt. The people who achieve long-term financial stability often aren't those who earn the most. They're the people who understand how money flows through the system and who avoid becoming permanently dependent on borrowing.
Nicholas Loris, we have about a minute left. How, if the federal government, this president or the next president, wanted to bring down the national debt, right, if that were his priority, how would he or she do it?
Yeah, in a minute. I think it's a really combination of factors. We do have to get discretionary spending under control. I mean, if we don't address Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security and actually look at hard reforms, it's just never going to happen because those three programs alone are going to balloon the debt moving forward without structural reforms that get it back into place. And I think it's going to.
So that's cutting government spending.
It's going to have to be.
Key things like
for sure.
Retirement benefits and health.
Exactly. But we have to. And I think looking at alternative scenarios, where we're raising the retirement age and the time when people can collect Social Security, looking at more private options, I think that we have to have those conversations, especially in the population cycle we're in now with baby boomers retiring and younger people having fewer kids. This situation, especially with regard to Social Security, is only going to get worse unless we fix some of that spending imbalances.
Okay, that's your fix. That is not the direction of travel, I have to say, for the current state of the U.S. federal budget and the U.S. economy, because you both pointed out earlier in this discussion that right now the debt is projected to continue increasing relative to the size of the U.S. economy.
At the beginning of this video, we asked a simple question. Why does America keep borrowing? The answer isn't because people are irrational, and it isn't because debt is inherently bad. It's because debt became deeply integrated into the way the modern economy functions. For banks, debt generates revenue. For businesses, debt fuels consumption. For consumers, debt provides immediate purchasing power. Everyone benefits, at least initially. But the longer debt survives, the more expensive that benefit becomes. And perhaps that's the most important lesson. The product isn't the credit card. The product isn't the loan, the product is future income. And every time debt is created, a portion of that future income gets sold today. Understanding that reality may be one of the most valuable financial insights anyone can learn. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe to Finance Decoded. Every week, we uncover the hidden systems shaping money, debt, banking, and the global economy. Because the biggest financial stories aren't always happening on Wall Street. Sometimes they're happening quietly inside your wallet. And understanding those stories today could save you years of financial mistakes tomorrow.